I think sometimes to really leave that legacy, you have to have a holy boldness. You have to be willing to take some risk. When you know God's put something deep down in your heart, don't let people talk you out of it. Don't let doubt talk you out of it. Don't let circumstances talk you out of it. Take that step of faith, and I believe you'll see God open doors that you never dreamed would open, and you can leave a legacy of faith, something far greater than you've ever imagined.
What words to the people that don't come from the same kind of backgrounds that we've had and are starting over? There's a lot of people viewing tonight that probably feel that way. I can never do anything because I didn't come from that same kind of legacy.
Yeah, it's interesting, man. I thought that same thing when Victoria was talking, because, I feel very blessed because I had parents that spoke faith into me, that loved me, that loved God, that honored God. But I realized not everybody has that. Some people, meet them all the time. I'm sure you do too, that they come from, people that they're not necessarily proud of. They love their parents, but there's other things. But I think my encouragement to you would be that you can be the one to start the new legacy. Yeah. I mean, you're not hearing this by accident. You could be the one to break the addiction or to rise higher, whatever held your family down. God's having you hear this so you can make some changes. I think a lot of times, Matt, we hear about a generational curse, but we can start a generational blessing. Amen. I believe that's what God wants us to do. And, we love those that have gone before us, but I don't believe we're supposed to stay there. And I think sometimes we can let those thoughts play, or especially people that weren't raised with people that push them forward to say, like you said, I'm not talented. I didn't have what you have, Joel. I didn't have somebody speaking faith into me, but nothing that you're facing is a surprise to God. God has already equipped you and empowered you. And again, I believe the reason you're hearing this is that faith can be ignited in your heart, so you can say, I'm the one to rise higher. I am going to start a new legacy. I am going to speak faith into my children. I am going to break this addiction. You can be the one to set a new standard. And so that would be my encouragement, is to don't get stuck in the past. Say, I will be the John Osteen in my family that can speak faith into others.
Yeah. In fact, that's what your father did, actually. Joel's father was the first one in his family to know Christ and accept Christ into his life. And he made a decision right then that he was going to raise his children and he was going to represent Christ. So, it takes faith, it takes determination, because sometimes we're plowing the field and we don't always feel like it's changing. But you got to know in your heart of hearts that you're making a difference, and your life has value and it has purpose. And, I can hear some people out there saying, well, I am the only one in my family who believes.
Wow.
And I've got all these unbelievers around me, and it's hard. Well, I would encourage them to keep plowing. The best way to show Christ and to leave a legacy is to leave a legacy of love. Yeah. And I think you can't change people, but you can let God change them. You sow the seed, just let your love water the seed, and God will bring the increase. But I would just encourage people, don't give up. Know that your life has value. God's got you here for a purpose and a reason, and that you are making a difference.
I know. Can I say one more thing, Matt and Laurie, too, is some people are raised in a limited environment. So my dad grew up during the Great Depression back in the 30s. His parents were cotton farmers, and during the Great Depression, they lost all their money when the banks closed. And so my dad, they didn't have money growing up for hardly to have enough food. He could never drink a full glass of milk, and just very extreme poverty. And at 17 years old, nobody in his family, like Victoria said, knew the Lord, but a friend of his in high school had been witnessing to him and just encouraging him. And, that was so far out to my dad, because there was just no history of faith. But my dad was walking home from a nightclub at 2 o'clock in the morning, 17 years old, and he felt God drawing him. He didn't even know what it was. He walked into the living room that night, and they did have a family Bible. They may have prayed at Christmas or something, but there was no faith in there. But he opened the Bible, and it fell open to a picture of Jesus standing at a door and knocking. And it said, if anyone, behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone opens the door, I'll come in. Well, my dad didn't know anything about religion, but he did know something about opening a door. And so that next morning, he called his friend. They went to church. His friend walked down the aisle, and he gave his life to Christ, the first one in his family. And what's interesting is, 17 years old, God put a dream in my heart that day that my dad would be a pastor one day to thousands of people. And back in the 30s, there wasn't a church of 1,000, church of thousands, but he knew he was supposed to do that. But here's the point I wanted to get to. His parents were great people. They loved God. But they said, basically, John, you can't be a pastor. You don't know how to do anything but pick cotton. He told him he was going to go and, start a church somewhere or go out and start ministering. But they loved him, but they tried to keep him in that same environment. Mm-hmm. At 17 years old, my dad hitchhiked and he went out and started preaching in the senior citizens' homes and on the street corners and things like that. And of course, he honored and respected his parents, but if he had if he had stayed in that limited environment, I wouldn't be where I am today. Lakewood wouldn't be here. And I think sometimes our environment is limiting us, and people love us. People that are around you may love you, and it's always good to honor and respect them. But sometimes God's going to put something in your heart where you have to take a step of faith. Yeah. Where you have to say, you know what, they're telling me not to, but God, I believe you determine my destiny. And so my dad broke out of the mold. Even later in life, when he was pastoring Lakewood, or before he pastored Lakewood, he was pastoring a denominational church, and the same thing. It's a longer story, but my dad took a step of faith and started Lakewood. And I think sometimes to really leave that legacy, you have to have a holy boldness. You have to be willing to take some risk. When you know God's putting something deep down in your heart, don't let people talk you out of it. Don't let doubt talk you out of it. Don't let circumstances talk you out of it. Take that step of faith, and I believe you'll see God open doors that you never dreamed would open, and you can leave a legacy of faith, something far greater than you've ever imagined.
Yeah. Was there ever a time that you just said, I can't do this?
I think there was times I felt that way, but I have a determination in me to kind of let that stir me to do it. But there were times I thought, I don't know what I can say this week, especially early on, because I look back now and realize God gives you grace for every season. Yeah. I was telling my kids the other day, when I look back, I think, how did I preach those first 6 months? I didn't know how long to make a message. I didn't know how to make a message, but there were times I thought, I don't know what to say this week. There's times I'd sit there and write for 8 hours and I'd get one paragraph. And I thought, man, it's going to take me 7 years to get one sermon. But you know what? You just keep pushing through it. And I think those are all testing times and proving times, and God saying, in a sense, how bad do you want it? Are you going to stick with it? And so even I was talking earlier about the first 12, 13 years of Lakewood, it started with 90 people. It had less than 200 people 12 years later. It didn't grow. And my dad was a great minister. He's a great pastor, and he could preach great sermons. But sometimes you're doing the right thing and you're not seeing growth. Maybe the wrong thing's happening. You think, man, I need to do something different, or God, your blessing isn't on this. But when you know it's what God put in your heart, you just got to keep doing it. You just got to keep being faithful, and don't compare to somebody else, or don't let your thoughts talk you out of it. Because let me tell you, you'll come into a time where in 1972, it was like God opened a door and people started coming from Lakewood all over the place, all over the city. I believe you'll come into those times where you'll hit a moment, a destiny moment, where God will open up new doors, and you'll see growth that will make up for all that time that you feel like you're falling behind. Listen, one touch of God's favor can put you 50 years down the road. So you keep being faithful. And I think, what's important is, sometimes, especially at the office, you think, well, nobody's giving me credit, and everybody's, people leaving me out, they're playing politics. But you got to realize you are not working under people, you're working under God. Promotion doesn't come from people, it comes from the Lord. And I've learned this, when it's your time to be promoted, all the forces of darkness cannot stop what God has in store for you.
At TBN, our mission is to use every available means to reach as many individuals and families as possible with the life-changing gospel of Jesus Christ.
Thank you for helping make the gospel of grace go around the world.
Without you, we couldn't do it. God bless you.